What if your greatest achievement was never acknowledged, simply because you were born first? I still remember the scent of lavender floating through the early morning mist outside our white-trimmed house. The sun would cast long, golden streaks across the picket fence, and inside, everything looked like a postcard version of suburban bliss. A cozy kitchen always smelled faintly of cinnamon toast, and every room was meticulously arranged, like a family that had it all together. But looks lie. And sometimes, the prettiest picture frames the ugliest truth. My name is Emily Carter, and I was born into a household that valued potential, but only when it belonged to someone else. My parents, Robert and Karen Carter, believed in raising brilliant children. They weren't harsh, they were methodical. Clinical, even. Dad was a software engineer, always scribbling formulas on scrap paper. Mom was obsessed with child development books. She once boasted to her friends at a brunch that she had read over 40 parenting guides before I was born. I was her first project. Her experiment. From the start, every moment of my life was measured and analyzed. Milestones were tracked, not celebrated. My first words were jotted into a journal and graded like a test. At 2, I was already expected to recite the alphabet backward, not because it was fun, but because it was developmentally superior. I tried. I really did. But by the time I turned 5, and I still couldn't write my name in a straight line or count past 15 without help, I remember hearing her sigh in the kitchen. Robert. I don't think she's going to be as quick as we hoped. She didn't whisper it. She said it like she was breaking bad news to a business partner. My dad just nodded quietly, glancing toward me like I was a spreadsheet with the wrong numbers. That look, it never really left his face. Then came Sophie. My little sister arrived when I was 7, and the shift was immediate, like a curtain had fallen and the spotlight moved. Our home transformed. Suddenly, every shelf held baby flashcards. Color-coded educational toys took over the living room. By the time Sophie was a toddler, she had a personal tutor, an imported learning chair, and a library of foreign-language baby books. Me? I had outdated workbooks and a worn-out pencil. My world got smaller. There's one memory I've never shaken. I was quietly building a Lego tower in the corner of the living room when Mom passed by. She glanced at me for half a second, then turned to Sophie, who was gurgling in her high-tech booster seat. She's only 10 months and already recognizing patterns, Mom beamed. Then to me, coldly, keep playing, Emily. Maybe you'll catch up. I didn't cry. I just nodded and kept building. I stopped showing them my drawings after that. Even when I won second place in an art competition in school at age 9, I came home excited, bubbling, for once. I handed Mom the certificate and pointed to my painting of a fox in a snowstorm. She barely glanced at it. That's nice. But Sophie read her first full book today. In English. She always said in English, like it made Sophie's accomplishment extra miraculous. Dad didn't even look up from the logic puzzle he was installing in Sophie's room. That's when I began to disappear, still there in body, but fading fast in every other way. At 10, I learned not to expect praise. At 11, I stopped waiting for hugs. At 12, I stopped trying to be seen at all. There are spaces in our lives that shape who we are. For me, that space was a small, upstairs bedroom with light gray curtains and a window that opened onto a forest of whispering pine trees. That room was mine. Or, it had been. I was 13 when it happened. Just after dinner one evening, I was taping a new drawing to the wall, something peaceful, a landscape with a sunset, a reflection of a place I wished I lived in. That's when Sophie barged in, without knocking. Mom says I'm moving in here. I need more space for my study area, she said casually, like she was asking for a snack. I turned, stunned. What? This is my room. I've had it since I was little. She shrugged. Yeah, well, I need it more. Less than 24 hours later, it was no longer mine. When I got back from school the next day, my belongings had been relocated to the smaller room downstairs, right beside the laundry machines. The walls were bare, the mattress too firm. My new desk could barely hold a notebook and a lamp without feeling cramped. Sophie's name was now painted above my old door in curly pink letters. Inside, her new room sparkled with brand new equipment, a whiteboard, a digital dictionary, a massive study desk that looked like it belonged in a Silicon Valley startup. I stood in my tiny new room that night, fists clenched at my sides, blinking back tears that never fell. I remember whispering to the closed door. "Mom, why?" That was mine. She didn't even face me. "You're older now. You need to learn to compromise. Sophie's needs come first." That's when it hit me. Not just the unfairness, but the permanence of it. I wasn't just overlooked, I was optional. By the time I turned 18, everything still revolved around Sophie. She was chauffeured in a new car to her prestigious private school. She had her own college counselor, a part-time psychology coach, and a weekend leadership mentor. Meanwhile, I walked to my public school and worked part-time at the library to cover my phone bill. I didn't complain. I never did. But I was unraveling quietly. Then came the dinner, the one that would break whatever thread of hope was left in me. Grandma Margaret and Grandpa George had come to visit. I loved them more than anyone. They were the only ones who looked me in the eye and asked how I really was. As we passed around plates of lasagna, Sophie began rambling about her upcoming Stanford summer program. Grandma smiled politely, then turned to me. "And you, Emily? What are your plans?" My chest swelled just a little. I got accepted into the University of Oregon's business program. Partial scholarship. If I get a little more aid. "We can't help with that," Mom cut in sharply, her fork clicking against her plate. Dad followed, voice like he was reading from a script. "We have to prioritize Sophie's prep program. It's Ivy League material. A once-in-a-lifetime opportunity." I looked at them, stunned. "What about the college savings? You said it was for both of us." "Sophie has real potential," Mom said, as if that settled it. "You might consider community college. Or work for a bit. Figure things out." No anger. Just indifference. And that hurt more. The silence at the table was sharp, so sharp, in fact, that even Sophie paused mid-bite. Grandma Margaret lowered her fork slowly, her expression still but unreadable. Grandpa George looked from me to my parents, his brows pulled low. "Karen," he said, voice calm but tight, "are you saying you're not supporting Emily's college expenses at all?" "It's not that simple, Dad," Mom responded, tone defensive. "We're doing what's best for the family." Best for Sophie, she meant. It was always best for Sophie. I felt the heat rising in my chest. Not from anger, but from embarrassment. Humiliation. That moment when you realize even the smallest hope you had, the hope that maybe, just maybe, this one time they'd see you, it was gone. No one else at the table said anything. The sound of silverware scraping ceramic filled the space where kindness should have been. After dinner, I helped carry plates into the kitchen. My hands shook as I stacked them in the sink. I didn't expect anyone to follow me in. But Grandma Margaret did. She placed a hand gently on my shoulder. It was warm. Steady. She didn't speak right away. Just stood beside me while I stared at the dirty water in the sink. Then softly, she said, "You don't have to carry this burden, sweetheart. Not alone." I turned to her, eyes glassy. "But college is expensive, Grandma. I don't want to be a burden on you and Grandpa either." She smiled. Not pitying, proud. "It's not a burden when it's an investment in someone who fights this hard. We'll cover your tuition. All of it. No loans. No strings." I nearly dropped the plate in my hands. I didn't answer right away. Couldn't. My throat tightened and words got stuck in a place that had been bruised for too long. But that night, I cried in bed, not out of despair, but relief. Because finally, someone chose me. That fall, I packed up what little I owned and left for the University of Oregon. I remember standing at the front door, suitcase in hand. Mom gave me a stiff hug and whispered, "Be frugal. Don't expect anything from us." Dad didn't even come to the door. Sophie didn't look up from her phone. I walked away without looking back. And it was the first time I felt free. College was unlike anything I'd known. Gone were the days of being the shadow. In Eugene, I was just Emily, a face in a crowd, no expectations to meet, no labels to wear. It should have been terrifying. But it felt like breathing for the first time. I lived in a modest dorm with creaky floors and thin walls. My roommate, Ava, was a political science major who wore oversized sweaters and had a laugh that echoed through the hall. We stayed up late trading stories about family, ambition, heartbreak, things I had locked away for years. Every day was a challenge. Classes were fast-paced. The professors didn't coddle. But I soaked up everything like a sponge. Finance and behavioral economics? They weren't just subjects, they were maps to understanding people, power, and possibility. I took part-time jobs, from working in the campus cafe to tutoring intro-level accounting. I spent weekends poring over market models and investment theories. I even volunteered for the university's investment club, where I met Professor Elgin, a sharp, no-nonsense man who wore corduroy jackets and carried around a decades-old leather briefcase. He saw something in me. Maybe it was my curiosity. Or maybe it was the way I always stayed after class with one more question. One evening, after a group presentation, he pulled me aside. "Have you ever thought about working in investment strategy?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't think I'm the kind of person firms usually go for." He raised an eyebrow. "And what kind is that?" I didn't have an answer. But he did. He handed me a card. "There's an internship at Bradley and Lane Capital in Seattle. It's highly competitive, but I'm recommending you." That internship changed everything. I still remember walking into their office, sleek, glass-walled conference rooms, polished marble floors, and a skyline view that stretched for miles. I wore the only business outfit I owned, an outdated blazer and a skirt I'd borrowed from Ava. In the interview, a man named Zalen asked me, "What's the most important factor in an investment strategy?" I thought for a moment. Then said, "Understanding the psychology behind the numbers. Data only tells part of the story. The people behind it, that's where the real insight lies." He leaned back. Nodded once. That was all. I got the offer the next day. And from that summer forward, I began to build something I never thought I'd have, a future I defined on my own terms. At 24, I graduated with honors, my research paper on market prediction published in a regional financial journal. That alone would have made the old Emily burst with pride, back when I still believed recognition had to come from home. But now, I didn't need applause. I needed impact. Bradley and Lane offered me a full-time role as a junior investment analyst. My first desk sat near the back corner of the 19th floor, tiny, tucked beside the coffee station, but it was mine. The office buzzed like a living organism, emails pinging, phones ringing, papers shuffling like wine through a canyon of ambition. And I loved it. Every day, I pushed further. I stayed after hours, studied shareholder behaviors, read between the lines of quarterly reports, and even listened to investor calls just to pick up on tone, confidence, hesitation, fear. There's something magnetic about watching patterns emerge from noise. 3 years passed like a blink, and one late Thursday night, that instinct kicked in again. I had been reviewing a high-net-worth portfolio, just routine work, when something didn't sit right. A collection of tech stocks we were heavily invested in looked too perfect. Their growth trends were sharp, consistent, and strangely immune to broader market dips. I didn't sleep that night. I ordered takeout, pulled up archived data, combed through financial footnotes line by line. By 4 a.m., I had my answer. Those companies were propping themselves up by buying their own products to inflate revenue, a house of cards. If we didn't pull out, we stood to lose upwards of $32 million in client funds. I printed a 42-page report and built a risk model simulation from scratch. That Monday morning, I walked into the executive boardroom, heart pounding like thunder under my blazer. No one interrupted me. When I finished, the CFO looked at me, then at the CEO, and said, "She just saved us." That single moment rippled through everything. Within days, our portfolio was restructured. 6 months later, our firm posted the highest growth margin in 7 years. My title changed to lead investment strategist, and I finally moved into a glass office with my own whiteboard and a corner view. But I wasn't finished. Every night after work, I tinkered with something I called Prism, a system that blended market analysis with human behavior tracking. Most people laughed when I said I wanted to integrate social media trends and political climate into a risk score model. But then Prism predicted the price swings of 3 major stocks, before any headlines hit. Upper management noticed. 1 year later, it became part of our core strategy. 2 years after that, we surpassed 2 of our top competitors. At 29, the CEO called me in. The boardroom was full. Everyone was waiting. "Emily," he said, smiling like someone who'd just placed a bet and won, "we're creating a new executive role, Chief Strategic Investment Officer. And no one is more deserving." I was breathless. Not because of the promotion, but because I had created the seat I was now being invited to sit in. That night, I didn't celebrate with champagne. I went to visit my grandparents. Grandma Margaret had made lemon chicken and roasted carrots. Grandpa George poured me a glass of sweet tea. I laid the appointment letter on the kitchen table. Grandma looked up, her eyes shining. "Little Emily," Grandpa said, voice thick with emotion, now leading the table. For once, I didn't need permission to be proud. When you spend most of your life being invisible, you learn to expect nothing. You learn to clap for others even when your hands ache. But I wanted this celebration to be different. My promotion wasn't just a job title, it was a reclamation. A confirmation that everything I endured, every quiet choice to rise above resentment, meant something. So, I planned a small gathering, my grandparents, a few close friends from the firm, my mentor Professor Elgin, and Ava, who drove down just to bring me my favorite chocolate cake from Eugene. Just as I was finalizing details, my mother called. "Why don't you let us host the party?" Karen said cheerfully. "Your family, after all. We'll make it warm, intimate. We'll handle the guest list and the setup, just send us the money for catering and decorations." Something inside me hesitated. But she sounded sincere, like someone trying for once. Maybe this was the turning point I'd always hoped for. So I wired $3,500 and left the rest in her hands. When I arrived at the old family home in Salem, it was transformed. Elegant orchids trailed across every table. Ribbons twirled up the stair rail like spun gold. Soft jazz played from unseen speakers. It looked more like a wedding than a career celebration. My grandparents were near the bar, quietly sipping sparkling cider. Then I saw Sophie. She descended the staircase like a vision in red silk, arm in arm with a man I didn't recognize, tall, polished, camera-ready. All eyes turned to them. I stood to raise my glass when Karen interrupted, smiling too wide. "Dear family," she said, voice ringing out like a spotlight, "tonight isn't just about reconnecting. We're thrilled to announce Sophie and her boyfriend Nathan are officially engaged." Applause exploded. Glasses clinked. I stood frozen. I turned to my mother, who gave me a brief glance, like I was just another guest at a party I paid for. My father walked over, gripped tight on my wrist. "Don't ruin this," he warned, his voice low. "If you make a scene, expect nothing. No inheritance. No family. Nothing." I gently pulled his hand away. And then I stepped forward. Glass raised, voice steady. "Excuse me, everyone. Just a quick word, if I may." The room went still. This gathering was meant to celebrate a promotion. Mine. I was recently named Chief Strategic Investment Officer at Bradley and Lane Capital. I sent the money. I trusted my family. A murmur moved through the crowd. Sophie's fiancé, Nathan, turned to her. You told me this was a casual dinner. Her face reddened. I was going to tell you. By throwing a party with your sister's money? He set down his glass. Walked away. Sophie chased after him. I stood in the silence they left behind. My father fumed. My mother looked like someone who'd been caught with her hand in a very expensive cookie jar. This house was never a home for me, I said, but I wanted to believe it could be. Now I know better. I turned to my grandparents. I don't need them to know who I am. You always did. And I walked out. This time, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman who refused to disappear. I had barely made it halfway down the front steps when I heard my name. Emily. Not my parents. It was Grandma Margaret, voice strong despite the trembling in her tone. She and Grandpa George followed me to the porch, their steps sure despite the decades behind them. Inside, the house had turned into a silent theater. My parents were frozen in place. Sophie was on the porch, her red dress wrinkled, mascara streaking down her cheeks, phone in hand, unanswered messages blinking across the screen. Before anyone could speak, Grandpa stepped forward. Robert, he said, his voice deep, commanding, with the weight only a man of principle could carry, if you're cutting Emily out, then it's time we clarify where our legacy stands. Karen blinked, clearly confused. What are you talking about? Grandma took her husband's hand and added, calm but resolute, we changed our will 3 months ago. Gasps rippled through the room. Everything, our home, our savings, our investments, the trust, we're leaving it all to Emily. There was a full second of stillness. Then Karen's voice cracked. What? She's never been, Sophie is my daughter. Exactly, Grandma replied. And we've watched her be handed every opportunity while Emily fought for every inch. Robert looked stunned, silent for once. Sophie's voice sliced through the silence. You're doing this because you think she's better? She's not. She's just jealous. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the lie hang in the air until Grandma turned toward her. Sophie, you made choices. And now you face consequences. This isn't punishment, it's justice. We're not rewarding deceit or entitlement. Sophie ran up the stairs, sobbing. Her red dress fluttered like a flag of retreat. Karen's lips trembled as she stepped toward me. Who do you think you are, humiliating your sister in front of everyone? I looked at her for the last time, not with hatred, not with sorrow. Just clarity. I'm someone who finally told the truth. Then Robert, who had remained silent for too long, stepped in with the final blow. If you walk out now, you're no longer our daughter. No inheritance. No contact. As far as we're concerned, you never existed. I was about to respond when Grandpa raised his voice again. Then let it be clear, he said, the only legacy that matters tonight is the one that comes from living with dignity. And just like that, the chapter closed. I walked out, not as a victim, not as the wounded child, but as a woman who chose herself. 3 years have passed since I walked out of that house. I haven't looked back. Not because I'm bitter, but because I finally understood, not all relationships are meant to be salvaged. Some must be released so we can grow. At 34, I now lead strategic investment at one of the most respected financial firms on the West Coast. My team calls me the compass because I never steer from my values. Every morning, I arrive before the sun, and every evening I leave knowing I built something real. But life hasn't just been about success. It's also been about healing. On Sundays, I drive to a little brick house tucked between maple trees in northeast Portland, Grandma Margaret and Grandpa George's home. The porch creaks just enough to be charming. Their garden smells like time and old memories. We sit on the patio, sip tea, flip through photo albums. Sometimes I bring lemon tarts. Sometimes Grandpa forgets stories he told the week before, and I retell them like new. He laughs anyway. One afternoon, I asked them, "Do you ever regret leaving everything to me?" Grandma smiled softly. "We didn't give it because of worth. We gave it because of who you became when no one was looking." It struck me, the most valuable inheritance wasn't property or money. It was belief, passed down from people who never needed me to prove my value to love me. Not long ago, something unexpected happened. I was leaving a strategy meeting when I saw a familiar face in the lobby. Sophie. She looked older, her hair pulled back, coat wrinkled, heels slightly scuffed. There was still a spark of vanity in her style, but it felt tired. "I'm not here to apologize," she said quickly, like a shield. "I just wanted to ask, how do you do it? How do you keep going without anyone helping you?" I didn't snap back. I didn't gloat. I just said, because there was a time when I had no one. And that's when I learned to stand. She stared at me for a long time, eyes flickering with something between guilt and confusion. Then she left. I don't know if she'll ever change. But I know I already have. Now, I mentor young women in finance, especially those who didn't come from polished backgrounds. I tell them the truth, that you can rise without revenge, lead without legacy, succeed without permission. A new intern, Nina, recently asked me, "Do you ever wish your family had treated you differently?" I paused. Then I answered, "Sometimes. But if they had, I wouldn't have become the woman I am now." At my home, a tiny framed quote sits by my window. "Grow even in the dark." And every day, I do.